Welcome back to Beyond the Campfire. We're a podcast that is hosted by Will the Cowboy and Stephen the Indian. Yes, we are a cowboy and Indian that talks about ghosts, conspiracy theories, cryptids, anything that might go bump in the night. So, if you're interested in our content, be sure to give us a follow on X, Instagram, on TikTok at Beyond Campfire Podcast or at Beyond Campfire. And yes, Will, what do we have today?
A buongiorno. Pack your bags. It's me, Mario. Today we're heading to Italy with the spicy meatballs. Yes, that's right. If you cannot tell by my terrible accent there and to call myself Mario, that is right. We are heading to the land of meatballs, the land of pizza, the land of the Pope. That's right. We're heading to Italy. And yeah, we've got a really kind of spooky episode where we're going to kind of try to weed out some of the fiction about the place, some of the rumors and stuff. And of course, working what's true, what's not true. So today we're traveling to the sinking city. Do you know what the sinking city is, Stephen?
I do not. Could you?
Venice.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Venice. You know, the good old land of Venice?
Oh, yeah, I know Venice.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
makes
it's sinking, right? Like it's sinking.
I always thought of it like as flooding, but you know what? That is a form of sinking. So
Yes.
I see where you're coming from. So yes, I have heard of Venice. I know it's having issues, and yeah, okay, all right. So there's conspiracies behind that.
Okay, so when you look at Venice, right, and I had to like look at a map because when I thought of Venice, I just thought it was like out in the middle of the ocean for some reason. It's not. It's kind of like when you're seeing Italy, right? You know, Italy is like the boot, and it's kicking Sicily. So on the back
Yeah,
end of the boot, kind of on the other side, closer to Russia's side, there's like a bunch of little islands, and there's like a really long island that kind of comes out to kind of protect it from the being in the Mediterranean. And there's a big cluster of islands that is main Venice, and of course outside of that are some smaller sort of islands around that area. One of those is the island we're talking about today, which is Poveglia Island. Poveglia, I think I'm saying that right. And this island is haunted. Some say the most haunted place in the world. There are disputes about that, though, as we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, again, like I said, I've gone through some conflicting reports, and it's been a roller coaster going through everything. According to some, locals do not even want to go near this place. It is that haunted. Like, they're afraid they're going to get cursed. So we'll actually get a little bit into actually the government shutting it down, by the way, because today you cannot even visit it unless you sneak on the island, little border hoppers. But yeah, so we're going to break it down. We're going to go through the history of the place. We're going to go through some of the hauntings, the layout of this building, like the layout of everything. And then, of course, we've got a really, really good spooky story about me and Stephen investigating Poveglia Island, which is one of 4 stories that I have from this lady. I'll be getting some more from her soon. Don't worry. But yeah, so to kind of begin the story of Poveglia Island, as you know, most of Venice was built, like the main stuff of Venice. That's why it's sinking. But with Poveglia Island, there were at least 2 natural islands that they were living on, and they were kind of established around the 7th and 9th century, somewhere around there under Roman control. That's when people kind of began to populate the island. Now, the first colony did trade with Pelletini, which is one of the main islands of Venice. They kind of did start trading with them, but they mostly avoided the Italian peninsula. They just kind of were like a little island colony, kind of kept to themselves, didn't really bother the rest. Part of the reason, according to some reports, was because they didn't have to pay taxes. So, you know what? Tax evasion. That's a good thing. However, in the 14th century, during the War of Chioggia, the place was abandoned. If you don't know what the War of Chioggia was, it was a conflict between the maritime republics of Genoa and Venice. Now, Genoa is on the other side of Italy, and Venice is on the other, and they were going to war. And there's a battle that kind of got a little too close, and the people were like, "Screw this, we're done. We're not putting up with this crap." So they left, and they settled on on the main island of Venice, specifically the island of Guadilla, which is kind of a little bit off the main island there. So the place then remained abandoned for a pretty long time. Like I said, that was about the 14th century, 14th, 15th century. The island, like I said, was then abandoned until the 18th century, where it was just kind of used for storage. In 1776, this is where it's fixing to get crazy, guys, because like, have you ever seen those TikTok videos where like they talk about like your perception of time is all messed up? This is how close things were.
Yes, I have seen that.
Right? You ready for your perception of time to be really screwed?
Oh boy, here we go. All right.
So in 1776, God bless the USA, the public health department basically of Venice at the time took over the island and used it as like a customs control.
Oh, okay.
That's where your perception of time is fixing to get
Yeah.
screwy.
Weird time stuff.
So the reason why Poveglia Island is so haunted is because of an incident that happened in 1793. Do you have any idea what was going on in 1793?
That I know in France there's French Revolution, but this isn't France. Well,
You ever heard of the bubonic plague?
Yes, it was happening. Wait.
There were two epidemics of the bubonic plague.
Oh, I see.
The first epidemic is the one that you know about from the 1400s, 1500s. Right. There was a second epidemic that was going on in the late 1700s, almost 1800s. Isn't that crazy to think that like 200 years ago, the bubonic plague was still happening?
Yeah.
It's crazy that people still get it today sometimes. Did you know some people get the plague still?
Yes, I know it's pretty rare, but yeah.
Yeah. And most people, I mean, nowadays people are surviving it because we have the right medicines.
Yeah.
But yeah, in 1793, two ships came to Poveglia Island or Poveglia Island. Mm-hmm. And yeah, both ships had several cases of the plague on the ships. And because of that, the health department quickly converted this from customs into a quarantine zone. So ships would come in with plague people and they would be quarantined at Poveglia, and then the ships would go out. Now, again, this is where there's a bunch of like mysteries and rumors, but rumor has it there's only two options about what would happen to these plague victims. The biggest rumor, this was pushed by the TV show Ghost Adventures, was that when you got all these bodies, what are you going to do with them, Steve?
Burn them?
Burn them.
Yeah.
Rumor has it that 50% of the soil on the island is human ash.
Wow, that is absolutely insane.
So that's one side of things where people say they burn the victims. The other side is that there are a bunch of plague pits on the island. So either way, we've got bodies on the island.
I could see why potentially this place might be haunted.
Do you want to take a guess how many people died during the plague at this place?
Gotta be in the millions, right?
100,000.
100,000. Oh, okay. Wait, it's a small island. I'm thinking like all of Europe.
Yeah, so. It's kind of a small island. Now, like I said, I was trying to like look through reports to see what some people say. Again, Ghost Adventures had a lot of heavy influence on this place with what was being said. So they had sub-locals on the show. You know, if you want to believe Ghost Adventures, that's a debate for another day.
Sure, yeah.
But they had said about 100,000. There were some other people there were some other blogs I was reading that were trying to say it was really like 20. But either way, a bunch of people did die on this island. Shortly after the plague incident, it eventually closed. And again, there's like some occupation. There used to be a church on the island. Napoleon actually destroyed it when he was taking over everything. And the only thing that remains of that was the clock tower. That's the most iconic thing you see of Poveglia Island when you look at pictures of it, is that tower looming in the distance.
Sure, yeah.
Now in the 20th century, again, that was last century. We're in the 21st. This is the 20th. It became a psych ward.
No way.
Yeah. So that's where they were locking Steven's exes up. Because you know what? If you don't fall for my Pookie, you definitely belong in a psych ward.
Right. So it goes from Black Death, quarantine, lots of deaths,
Yeah.
No wonder. No wonder this place.
No wonder. I mean, come on. Yeah, and so it became a psych ward. And then, like I said, today, so the psych ward closed in like the 40s, and then I think I can't remember exactly what it opened up as. Some said like a retirement place or something, and that ran until about the 60s, and then like in the 60s was when everything like completely shut down and closed. And then of course the government today says the public cannot go there. So if you want to go there, you've got to pay a fisherman to take you there sometimes and kind of sneak on the island. But the government has deemed it off limits. There's a bunch of conflicting reports about the reason why the government says it's off limits. Some say it's because the hauntings. Some say because it's a desolate ruin because like these buildings are decrepit and falling apart. Others say because of the soil being probably tainted by the bubonic plague. You know, it's just bad mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just a lot of different things fusing together within just a few hundred years. So
yeah. So to talk about the layout of the island, there are 3 islands, and they've kind of like, they're like, in a row. One island is completely overgrown with vegetation. If there were buildings there, they've been completely reclaimed by Mother Nature. There's a bridge to connect the two. There are some ruins on the vegetation island, but again, like I said, it's mostly been taken over by dirt and stuff, or not dirt, plants and stuff. Then there's the second island. So when you're like kind of going to succession here, the second island has some buildings. That one's also natural. And then that one was kind of just, that's where everything was housed. The psych ward, the, where most of the plague victims were probably taken, all that kind of stuff. And then the third island, which is kind of like not connected at all through a bridge or anything, it was actually a man-made island built the same way as Venice, which is the reason why Venice is sinking, because they would take wooden pylons and kind of build these man-made islands. And of course, because the wood is old and rotting, the island is sinking. So that's kind of like the layout of the place. I'm going to kind of get into some of the hauntings of this location.
yeah.
Any questions before I continue?
Anywhere you have a lot of death, particularly gruesome death, right, on that scale with that much stuff going on, yeah, something's gonna linger, right? And
yeah, something's got to linger.
Maybe not everybody believes it's paranormal per se, but something's there. So
yeah,
not really a question. That was more of a comment. But that said, I am curious how paranormal activity is manifesting on that island. So yeah, go ahead and tell us about these hauntings.
Well, to kind of go ahead and separate fact from fiction, there were reports I had where, and again, these are some legends. So there's a lot of legends. There's a lot of hauntings. One legend has it that there was a doctor who worked at the psych ward, and apparently he could like performed a lot of lobotomies on people. There have been, there's like, again, this is a legend, but modern folklore, again, like I said, there's a doctor performed cruel experiments on patients. And apparently these patients now again, this is where you also can kind of separate fact from fiction. Whether or not this legend is true, who knows? But there are reports and claims that the psych patients were seeing ghosts, and that's something that the doctor also started to see the ghosts, and that he went insane. And like I said, was performing all these bad experiments, and he jumped to his death from the clock tower.
Oh, yikes. My goodness.
Yeah. So, again, that's a legend. So we don't know how true that is. That's why I want to start with something that's kind of like not as well, like, again, that might not be true. But as for being true, there have been known where boatmen in the lagoon apparently have claimed to hear cries, moans, and screams drifting from the island at night. So, kind of just spooky stuff. Visitors and explorers have reported seeing dark human-like shapes in broken windows or moving through the old hospital halls. The most famous story, or one of them, is that the bell tower tolls despite the bell no longer functioning. Some claim it rings before storms when trespassers arrive. The bell just rings by itself. And yeah, that's just like I said, just all around spooky stuff. There was rumor that on the Ghost Adventures TV show, I tried to watch that to kind of get some information, that Zach Bagans, the guy on the show, apparently was possessed when they went to the island. Again, though, like if you listen to me and Steven, when we talk about ghosts and hauntings and that sort of thing, to us, I believe that I believe that if dark stuff happens at a place, it creates a womb. And I think, like if we're hearing that boats are passing by and hearing cries and screams, that's just that to me. I don't think is like, when we think of ghosts, there are different types of haunts. People say there's like residual haunts, and then there's like intelligent. Residual is just repeated things happening. There's that repetition. So like I think that, and maybe like some of the shadow figures definitely could just be something just that it's not there. It's not actually like an actual person, but it's just, just residual energy just because of that darkness, But we do know that there are demons. And so if there are dark shadows moving about, who knows?
Yeah, it's just spooky stuff for sure. And yeah, it sounds like people can sneak onto the island, maybe.
So you can sneak on the island, but a lot of times if you ask, you can get permission.
Oh, I see. All
If
right.
you like, because obviously, like with Ghost Adventures, they got permission to go to the island. Like if we want to go to the island, we would have to probably contact somebody and figure out some government channels to work to figure that out. But I'm pretty sure we asked, we probably could get permission.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. Well, would that be a place you'd want to go to, or would you be like, maybe skip out on this one? Now,
I don't know. I don't know. Just because, like when you hear about these things, and like I feel like for those of you who don't know, Steven and I definitely have something special coming up soon. So we'll see how we do during that. But I think with this investigation, if we did Poveglia Island, we might encounter something. I know that there was a blog I was reading about this guy who wanted to go to the island. And he, like, of course, he didn't get permission from the government. He ended up paying like 180 euros to this fisherman to take him there because no other fisherman wanted to do it. And when he got to the island, he never even really went into the island. He might have explored a little bit, but he mostly like stayed on the dock. And he did not sleep at all that night. He's like, I still believe in ghosts. Did I encounter anything? No, not really. But it still terrified the hell out of me. So I think it'd be fun, to go and do it. I might, yeah, I think I'd be down to go do that.
Mm. All right. So yeah, all right. I feel like I have a degree of bravery, but obviously it has its limits. But I feel like when I'm with you, I feel like I can kind of take on almost anything, right?
Yeah.
Something about our brotherhood just
that's very gay. Yeah,
elevates what I already am. So
yeah. Well, that's like well, and of course we're not going to be telling you guys. Hopefully, we're not, saying too much about what we're planning to do soon. But I did tell Maddie, my wife, about what we're planning to do. I said I'm gonna leave Steven locked in there by himself to where each of us take an hour in this area by ourselves. And I said I give Steven 10 minutes.
Yeah.
10 minutes and he comes screaming like a little girl out of there. So any thoughts, questions before I get into our story?
Nope. I think yeah, I see this as a place of unique tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't believe in the ghost aspect of things, like we said, there was tragedy. There was the psych ward, and I've had a mad doctor performing lobotomies, but there were still unethical methods used for treating the special needs and stuff back then with psych wards than what we know today. So there could have been lobotomies happening. That part could be true. But we do know that there were plague victims there, and it just, I think I think the tragedy definitely is going to be something like if you go to this island, you might feel depressed. There are reports. I forgot to mention this. There are reports of people that go to the island that do have that feeling of just sadness and just that feeling of dread. And I feel like it's just common with some of these kind of places, you know.
Yeah, no, makes sense. But yeah, without further ado, yeah, I think we're ready for our encounter on that
Yeah.
island. So yeah, very curious to hear the story.
All right. The Haunting of Poveglia Island, Part 1. The Welcome Party. No one tells you what to expect when visiting a forbidden island, especially not one ridden with souls of the aggrieved. If you had told me a few years back that someday my buddy and I will visit the most haunted island in Italy, a place with a history so gory you have to pause and question humanity for a moment, I would have sent you to the loony bin. Yet here we were, unsupervised, ill advised, and on the sunny shore of Poveglia Island. Even the sun shone differently, like a pale reflection of its usual radiance. Jesus, it's weird here, Stephen said immediately as he got onto the shore next to me. What are we doing here again? I turned to look at him. He took a moment before he met my gaze. Hoping to find ghosts? He shrugged, kept walking. I took another long look around. I took another long look at the towering building rising over the cliffs. How did we get here, Will? I continued after him. Stephen and I had packed only a day's supply and made sure we'd arrived early in the day to ensure us leaving first thing in the morning. We spent a lot of time looking into the history of Poveglia Island. And let me tell you, there are ghosts here, and not the friendly kind. You see, it's different when a spirit has an utterly undeniable reason to remain on this plane. It often means that what was taken from them cannot and will not be compensated for. Get on the nerves, and you're the next horror story. People can't decide whether to believe or not. We were already pulling a dangerous move, spending the night regardless of what we see. But once daylight meets the sky, we take whatever information we've gathered and head out. We move through the rooms together, taking in the scene for ourselves. The history written into the walls, seeping out the floor, choking the atmosphere. It made it hard to think of this place as anything but the murder asylum it was. Echoes scattered around the walls periodically, some of which we found explanations, most of which simply had none. Once again, there was that feeling of being watched, considered, judged, leaving you wondering if your next step might trigger the wrath that lived in this place. Holy Father! I turned to Steve, who kept walking past me like he'd just seen, well, what happened, man? I'd head over to him when he slowed down eventually. I think I just saw someone looking across the hall at me. I turned back instinctively, kept my heart rate as low as I could as my gaze remained in place for a moment, waiting. Nothing. Part 2. The Ghosts of Poveglia Island. All right, I tapped Steve. Let's keep going. He nodded once, jaw tight but controlled. If we were already seeing them, a lot was definitely in store for us. We moved forward together, eyes sharp, boots scraping lightly against the fractured tile. The corridor opened into a wider chamber, most likely a patient ward once upon a time. Rusted bed frames sat in rows like skeletal remains of structure, their metal joints fused stiff with time. The ceiling sagged in places, long cracks running like veins through discolored plaster. Steve stepped near the far wall. Temperature drop, he muttered. I checked my handheld reader. He was right, 3 degrees down. Not dramatic, but miserable. Stephen turned on the audio recorder clipped to his chest. Small red light blinked alive. Poveglia Island, he said clearly. Upper ward, approximately 1400 hours. Temperature anomaly detected. If there's anyone here who wishes to make themselves known, We will not interfere. Negotiating with the ghosts. That was your big plan? I groaned. You'd be surprised how often this works. I'm not sure the ghosts you're inviting are very friendly. We continued down the hall, expecting nothing and everything. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It had weight to it, a density, like the air itself had thickened. Then came the first sound, a soft dragging from behind the beds. Both of us pivoted at the same time. A figure stepped into view, stuck between transparent and physical, hiding in the shadows. It looked like a man, thin, hospital gown hanging loose, head tilted slightly to one side. His face wasn't distorted, just blank, as though emotion had been removed from the mold before it set. Steve slowly raised the infrared camera. Heat wave spike. I reached for my holster, my eyes frozen on the spot. Will? I know. The figure didn't react. It moved past the beds in a straight line, gliding more than walking, until it reached the opposite wall. And then it simply continued. Through it. Gone. The temperature stabilized immediately. Steve lowered the camera. Well, he exhaled softly. That didn't take long. He checked the recorder. Still blinking. Clear visual manifestation, I said, and he nodded. Non-aggressive, linear movement pattern, no response to verbal engagement. We weren't surprised. Poveglia didn't hide its history. We continued through the building, room by room. Some spaces were empty, save for debris. Others felt occupied. Not visually, but spatially. Like entering a room mid-conversation in what must have been an administrative office we encountered the second. This one was different. A woman seated behind a collapsed desk, her posture upright, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked directly at us. Stephen nodded respectfully. You see that? I can't stop. The woman blinked once. That was all. The next moment happened strangely before our eyes. And what seemed like time itself shifting, what we were looking at began to look different until we couldn't tell the difference anymore. When we walked closer, we saw just a portrait hanging weirdly against the chair. The chair was empty, dust undisturbed. But we knew what we saw. Got that? I asked. Steve checked the screen. The chair showed empty the entire time. We replayed it, but nothing. Well, we had watched her sit there for nearly 30 seconds. On recording, no one. We exchanged a look. Selective manifestation, Steve said quietly. Or frequency shift outside lens range. He gave a faint smile. Always with the logic. Logic keeps us steady. The afternoon faded quicker than expected. Shadows lengthened down the corridor, stretching like dark fingers across tile and brick. We set up our night equipment in what had once been the central ward, wide enough for visibility, structurally safe enough to remain in. 2 static cams, 1 thermal, 2 audio recorders, an EMF reader between us. We didn't light a fire, didn't use more illumination than necessary. Spirits were here. They didn't need provocation. By 11:47, the island had gone completely silent. No birds, no wind, no water movement. Midnight arrived without ceremony. And then the crying started. It wasn't loud. That would have been easier. It was layered. Moans, whimpers, low, exhausted sobbing from multiple directions at once, echoing through the halls and bleeding into the room we occupied. Steve checked the timestamp on his camera. 12:03. he said softly. The EMF reader flickered once, then steadied. The crying intensified. Footsteps joined in, slow, dragging, crossing the upper floors. Something heavy fell in the distant room, wood splintering. We didn't move, didn't speak unless necessary. Audio levels stable, I murdered into my recorder. Multiple disembodied vocalizations, non directional origin. A shadow passed across the far wall, then another. 3 figures emerged in the doorway. Different ages, different builds, all wearing variations of hospital gowns or tattered clothing from another century entirely. They didn't rush at us. They stood, watching. Steve adjusted his focus ring slowly. The thermal cam registered them, faint but present. One of the figures stepped forward. A young boy. His eyes were not hollow or black. They were simply tired. He opened his mouth. The crying in the building stopped instantly. From his throat came a sound that did not match his size, a deep, resonant exhale that vibrated through the room like wind in a cavern. The EMF spiked. Steve whispered, a prayer, I assumed. Stay quiet, he muttered. I am, I replied. The boy tilted his head. Then, but one by one, the figures dissolved, like smoke thinning into air. The crying resumed, but further away now, circling the building, passing outside the walls, around us. We stayed until 2:15. At that point, the activity lessened to sporadic movement, doors shifting, distant pacing, nothing hostile. At 2:30, we switched to watch. Steve took position near the cameras while I lay back against the wall, eyes closed but not sleeping, just resting. The sounds continued intermittently. A scream at 3:12, brief, cut off abruptly. Scraping at 3:47, something dragged across concrete. Steve remained steady. Later, he told me that around 4:20, a line of figures walked past the doorway in complete silence. He counted 7, all moving in the same direction, toward the bell tower. He did not follow. Soon after, the bell rang. The bell? I asked, swiping sleep from my eyes, and he turned to me. Yes. We both stayed awake after that. When the first gray of morning touched the broken windows, the atmosphere shifted. The weight lifted. The building returned to being simply abandoned. We powered down the equipment methodically. As we exited the ward, I paused once more in the corridor where Steve had first seen someone. Now I saw them too. 2 figures standing side by side across the hall. They faded gradually as sunlight strengthened behind us. Outside, the lagoon shimmered as if nothing unnatural had occurred. We loaded the boat in silence. Halfway across the water, Steve checked the recordings. The audio captured everything. The crying, the footsteps, the deep resonance from the boy. The thermal footage showed faint silhouettes. The static cams, however, only showed empty rooms. Selective perception again, Steve said. I nodded slowly. Poveglia Island is not empty. It may not scream for attention, nor does it lash out blindly, but it remains occupied by those who had no say in leaving. As the island grew smaller behind us, the bell tower stood rigid against the morning sky. The end.
Man, she is a good writer.
Oh yeah, I like it. It's a lot better than that ChatGPT crap.
Exactly. Yeah. No. There's that human element, right?
Yeah.
Touch that AI cannot replicate.
Nope. So yeah. What are your thoughts on Poveglia Island?
I think something is there for sure. To what extent? Who knows, right? But yeah, anybody saying like, it's just in people's heads or things like that, I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
No, I think whether or not you look at even if 20 people were sent there to die, you know, if it wasn't 100,000 like they say, even if it was 20, that's still a lot of people that were sent to an island to die of the plague, you know. And I think because of it having that sort of that dark history, it feeds. So I think there could be something there, and I think Steve and I at some point, I think we need to pay some dude to take us on the island, or we get permission.
There we go.
So yeah, any last minute thoughts?
Nope. I think that about covers it.
Well, thank you guys again for watching, and make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, they sent the sick there to die and left the dead there to watch.